All right, today we're diving into some really groundbreaking research. It connects one of the most common health issues out there to, well, one of the most feared brain diseases we know of. And this link? It could totally change how we think about keeping our brains healthy.
So let's just get right to it with the big question. Can your metabolic health, how your body processes energy, actually tell you anything about your risk for a brain disease like Parkinson's? It sounds a bit out there, right? But the answer, according to this new research, is a pretty shocking yes.
And we're not talking about a tiny, insignificant risk here. This major study found that if you have something called metabolic syndrome, your risk of developing Parkinson's disease goes up by about 40%. 40%! That's a huge signal, one we really have to pay attention to.
Okay, so that probably has you wondering, what exactly is this condition, metabolic syndrome? Let's get into it, because I'm willing to bet it's way more common than you realize.
How common? Well, get this. It's estimated that about 31% of the entire world's population has it. Just let that sink in. That's basically 1 out of every 3 adults you know walking around with a condition that seriously bumps up their health risks.
So here's the key thing to understand. Metabolic syndrome isn't just one disease. Think of it more like a collection of risk factors that all show up together. For a long time, we knew this cluster was a big red flag for things like heart disease, stroke, and type 2 diabetes. But now, this new research adds Parkinson's disease to that list, and that's a game changer.
Okay, so how do you know if you have it? Well, it's actually really specific. Doctors look at these 5 key things. First, a large waistline, what some people call abdominal obesity. Then high blood pressure, high blood sugar, high triglycerides, which are a type of fat in your blood, and finally, low levels of that good cholesterol, the HDL. The magic number here is 3. If you check the box on at least 3 of these 5, that's the official diagnosis for metabolic syndrome.
But wait, it gets even more interesting and a bit more nuanced. The study found that the risk isn't just a simple yes, you have it or no, you don't kind of thing. It's what scientists call a dose-response relationship. Let me explain.
See, it's not like the risk suddenly flips on like a light switch the moment you hit that 3 out of 5 mark. The connection is actually much more direct, and honestly, it's a bit more concerning.
Because it's all about how many of those 5 components you have. Think of it like a ladder. Each one of those risk factors is another rung you climb, and with each rung, your risk for Parkinson's gets a little bit higher.
Yeah, an expert who looked at the study, Dr. Michael Oken, he put it really simply. He said, the more features of metabolic syndrome you have, the higher your Parkinson's risk. It's that straightforward. So someone with 4 or even all 5 of these risk factors, they're facing an even higher risk than someone who just has 3.
And you might be wondering, how solid is this evidence? Well, it's incredibly strong. This wasn't some tiny study. They used data from the UK Biobank, which means they looked at, get this, over 467,000 people, and they followed them for 15 years. The sheer size and length of this study just gives its conclusions a ton of weight.
All right, so this is all a bit sobering, right? But what do we do with this info? Well, this is where the story pivots. It goes from being a warning to being really a call to action, because what these findings really do is open up a whole new way to think about prevention.
This research is basically forcing us to totally shift our perspective. The old way of thinking was that metabolic syndrome was, well, a problem for your heart, for your risk of diabetes. The new view? It's a full-body, systemic issue with very serious consequences for your brain.
And here's why that shift in thinking is so important. Dr. Daniel Trung points out something crucial. Parkinson's disease can just quietly smolder for 10 to 20 years before you see any of the classic symptoms. So if we now know that metabolic syndrome is a major clue, we can spot people who might be at risk way earlier. And that, as he says, means that prevention isn't just a dream, it's actually possible.
So, if there's one single thing I want you to take away from all of this, it's this. The most important, most empowering part of this story is that metabolic syndrome is highly modifiable. This isn't some genetic sentence you can't do anything about. No way. It's a risk factor that you, personally, have a ton of control over.
And the ways to change it, they're the things we've been hearing about for years, but now they have this whole new level of urgency. Things like managing your weight and your waistline, keeping your blood pressure and blood sugar in check, improving your cholesterol with diet and exercise. This stuff isn't just about heart health anymore. We now have to see this as a core strategy for protecting your brain.
Which really leaves us with a pretty provocative question to end on, doesn't it? Is it possible that the key to preventing one of the most feared and complex brain diseases out there has been hiding in plain sight this whole time? Hiding in the day-to-day management of our metabolic health? This research certainly suggests that it just might be.